Hello there, this is James Scroff, you know, 1978, and especially if you are right-wing, a libertarian, or otherwise sincerely believe in the principles which the Republican Party in the US, the Conservative Party here in the UK, and the Liberal Party in Australia pretend to stand for, then you should never vote for any of those parties again, and I almost feel sorry for the poor deluded puppets who stood for and won elections on those parties' platforms, genuinely believing that those parties stand for anything at all, because regardless of whether we use the shorthand term neoliberal to describe them or not, all three of these political parties receive the overwhelming majority of their funding from millionaires, billionaires, and business interests who also own and or control a large chunk of the media, to the extent that just like those owned and or controlled swathes of the media, the parties themselves are merely fronts. Puppets or actors pretending to be political parties which exist primarily, if not solely, to further enrich and empower their owners through A. cutting taxes for corporations and the 1%, B. cutting regulations, abolishing rights, leaving massive loopholes in tax laws, and otherwise changing the law to make it easier for them to do whatever is necessary to gouge more profit from us, and more importantly, hold on to it. C. selling them publicly owned assets which they can then exploit and gouge for further profit under the banner of privatisation, and D. giving them taxpayers' money in the form of government contracts, and worse, corporate welfare, literally handing the world's most profitable companies billions of pounds or dollars for nothing, while condemning poor single mothers who work 3 jobs and still can't afford to feed their children as the parasites and scroungers who are single-handedly responsible for the state of our economy. But free market, competition, I hear you cry in response to all of this, along with perhaps how immigrants, refugees, single mothers, and other people at the bottom of the social hierarchy are indeed the true parasites who are the cause of all of our woes. To which I refer you back to the point I made earlier about how the same millionaires, billionaires, and corporate interests who effectively own the political parties that preach this mantra also own and or control large swathes of the media and have spent decades and billions conditioning us to believe their propaganda, so that we'll be so outraged by the thought of the poor stealing pennies by comparison that we won't notice that they're robbing us blind. And similarly, every single so-called culture war issue, from same-sex marriage to gun control in the US, and from women's right to choose to immigration and the refugee crisis, they are all stirred up by the same millionaires, billionaires, and corporate interests for the sole and express purpose of persuading as many people as possible to vote for whoever and whatever will further enrich and empower them. With a perfect example of this being Brexit, which literally only became an issue after the EU announced that it was going to be cracking down on tax evasion, causing the wealthy who didn't really gain from being in the EU and didn't want to give up their hoarded wealth to agitate Europhobic Tory MPs, pushing David Cameron into calling a referendum, and then create and fund the Leave campaign with the help of Russian oligarchs. And ironically, while other millionaires, billionaires, and corporate interests who still own and control what used to be David Cameron's branch of the Tory party and will lose money and power if we do leave the EU were convinced that the Leave campaign could never possibly win, they were ultimately hoisted by their own petard, because the very same racist and xenophobic propaganda which they've also spent decades and billions promoting to ensure that their Tory puppets run the country also ensured a Leave victory, meaning that now, no different from the millionaires, billionaires, and corporate interests who own and control the Republican Party in the US, and who've also spent decades and billions stirring up the not racist and not xenophobic mob, only to have to now spend even more money struggling to keep the facade of a party that they've spent decades constructing from burning itself down, now that an idiot who is stupid and delusional enough to actually believe and act on their propaganda is president. The owners of the Tory party are trapped between a rock and a hard place, desperate to keep their puppet May in power, and sacrificing billions of pounds, as well as much of the country, but they don't really care about that, to push through the least terrible version of Brexit that Tory voters will accept, in the ultimately futile hope of maintaining control by keeping their puppet government in power after the next election, trembling with terror at the prospect of a Corbyn government taking even more money and power away from them. Indeed, why do you think that while his infamous wall remains largely a pipe dream, his abolition of Obamacare died on the vine, and his travel ban had to be watered down to the point of meaninglessness, the only three genuine accomplishments that Trump can claim credit for are slashing regulations, including abolishing internet neutrality, cutting taxes for corporations and the 1%, and putting right-wing justices on the Supreme Court who will rule in favour of corporations at every possible turn. Because those goals have been at the top of the Republicans' priority list for decades, to the extent that they are the party's sole reason to exist. And why? Because they are what the Koch brothers and other billionaire, millionaire and corporate interests who own the Republican Party bought and paid for. But naturally, of course, no different from the Tories in the UK and the Liberals in Australia, the Republican Party, along with their new Supreme Court justices and their fellow owned and controlled puppets in the media, will continue throwing red meat to their I'm not bigoted but voting base, inciting outrage, passing laws and ruling against fags, dykes, trannies and whores, immigrants and foreigners, particularly Muslims, black and brown people in general, the sick, the disabled and the poor, socialists, atheists, feminists, SJWs, and everyone and everything else who the paranoid, gullible, and not bigoted honest can be convinced are going to strip them of their rights and destroy their way of life so that they'll keep voting for Christmas like the good little turkeys they are. Whenever they get desperate, just as the Tories are right now, throwing bones to moderates, appealing to the centre ground, screaming that socialists are the real bigots and doing whatever else they can to appeal to new voters, and occasionally, whenever it becomes impossible for the unwashed masses to ignore the fact that their government is giving away billions to corporations and billionaires while squeezing us even harder and blaming it all on Tiny Tim, pretending to stand up against their owners and fight for the common people as part of their massive career-long acts.
To be fair, there are moments of exceptional acting. They do almost make you forget they receive nearly 100% of their funding from companies like Exxon, Lend-Lease and BHP, with their aptly named Google tax.
Because a lot of people are saying it's so minuscule it doesn't even qualify as a tax, to which I'd retort, well, Google tax then. Passes the raw definition.
Which is revealed, very dramatically, to raise a whopping $200 million over the next 4 years. The same time period, multinationals are expected to avoid $33,600 million. So again, cannot stress this enough, this is the Liberal Party's rendition of Robin Hood.
Where we, the Liberal Party, a real parliamentary party...
Don't put that in inverted commas, Scott Morrison. You're not good at ad-libbing, or for that matter, anything at all.
Taking corporate tax evasion from $33.6 billion all the way down to $33.4 billion.
No, we just handed corporations a $100 million tax cut.
Yeah, that was a bit harsh throwing that on them in just the cycle of a leap year, so we'll take it from $33.6 billion to $33.5 billion.
Oh, if we're counting corporate tax cuts, when I was Treasurer, I gave them $6 billion. Shut up, Joe Hockey.
But Malcolm, if we add that, we've actually increased the amount corporations are getting away with by $5.9 billion.
All the motivation to act better, you talentless bulldog. George Brandis, Friar Tuck.
Oh, just because I'm fat and bald, I should have never said people have the right to be bigoted.
Calculate the figures, you obese mole rat, and I'll give you a turkey leg.
Ooh, turkey's the big chicken. We're up to $39,500,000,000, sir.
And the $7.6 billion tax cut I gave to the fossil fuel industry.
Tony, I thought we've discussed this. Your wheezing genius Malcolm in the Middle character is no longer required.
You're just intimidated by my powerhouse delivery. Right, so apparently we're only going to put up with $47.1 billion.
Don't look in the camera.
Why, is it like looking at a solar eclipse? It's alright, I'm wearing glasses.
Don't forget the $7.4 billion we just gave to the big banks in this budget. No, be quiet, Chris Pine. You man-child. You're only here to regale us with your happy genes. Okay, but we're allowing corporations to get away with $54.5 billion now.
Oh, so that's where that $54.1 billion we cut from hospitals went.
Oh, will this ever be filmed? Some of us have a blimp to catch to the Cayman Islands. Hang on. We're only going to get $100 million from the Google tax? It's going to cost us about 7 times that to chase it down. No, you dancing fool. We're pretending to chase these corporations. It's a $678 million prop. We're actors. We pretend. This is theatre. You don't have to tell me. It says in my Star Now account that I'm a triple threat.
Oh, God, he's singing again. Happy place, happy place.
I'm a franchise owner of Jim's Mowing.
No, the blimp I was going to catch to the Cayman Islands has been exposed. Oh, the humanity.
The Liberal Party's rendition of Robin Hood. 0 stars.
And all the girlies say I'm pretty fly for a white guy.